And like I said in the emails, this is really informal.
Okay.
Teaching leadership class of first year doc students, and it's EDD in higher ed.
Okay.
And someone else taught it last semester, and they used everyone from our campus. I'm at the University of West Georgia, and when I was talking to my friends about it, someone suggested you for the perspective, especially the student development understanding that you have. So I want you to tell me everything that you know and that you think they need to know as
Okay.
budding professionals in higher ed.
Got it.
So, so if you could start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your path to your current position.
It's interesting that I'm working at an institution of higher education because I come from a family of educators. And when I was a child and I was helping my mother grade papers, put up bulletin boards,
Yes.
and those kinds of things, I vowed I'd never have anything to
Really?
do with education, right?
Yeah.
And so ending up on a college campus is quite interesting to me. My background is I've always had an acumen for numbers. So I have a finance undergrad and an MBA in finance. And I actually traveled to Austin, Texas to do my doctoral
I
work.
saw that. Yeah.
And my intent was to get a PhD in finance and teach finance.
Ah.
But I moved to Austin and worked for the Texas State Auditor's Office to become a Texas resident for a year first,
Okay.
right? So to get in-state tuition, I needed to work for the state. I mean, I needed to work within the state, okay? And so I was auditing colleges and universities, and I came in contact with quite a few administrators who were less than impressive to me.
I bet you did.
I'm just gonna say it, okay? And the more I interacted with them, the more I realized that I actually would have more power and influence sitting in an administrative office than I would sitting in the classroom
Right.
in terms of ensuring, right, the quality of the educational enterprise.
Right.
So it was actually a very valuable experience. I became a Texan, but it also helped me appreciate that I could take those same finance skills, become an administrator, and ensure that institutions were doing what they needed to do. So I actually shifted my focus from wanting to teach finance to becoming a CFO. So I did my doctoral work in higher ed administration so that I could couple my knowledge of finance with how the academy
Right.
operates, right?
Exactly.
And so my first position was at Houston Tillotson University in Austin, an institution I'd never heard of before.
I haven't. Yeah.
But it's a historically Black church-related institution in Austin. I had friends who worked there, and they had gone through a negative program review with the Department of Education, meaning they got in lots and lots of trouble. And I was auditing federal financial aid programs for the state of Texas.
Okay.
So everybody that they needed to know at the Department of Education, at the regional office in Dallas, I knew. And so they created a position for me to come to Houston Tillotson to help them get out of trouble with the Department of Education.
So full-time consulting almost.
Well, I went over as the assistant dean of financial services.
Oh, okay.
I did that for 5 years. I was finishing up my coursework, and I said to the president, look, it's time for me to go find a CFO job. That's really what my credentials are in. This enrollment management thing has been good. I was actually good at it,
yeah.
But I want to go back to what my discipline is. And we were looking for a CFO at Houston Tillotson, and he said, why don't you take the 3 weeks off that you said you needed to write the first draft of your dissertation, and when you come back, you'll come back as the vice president of finance and administration. So that's how I kind of got to this place. And so this is my third vice presidency, and I am meant to do this kind of work.
Excellent.
Right?
Yeah.
And I really do think it comes out of the enrollment management experience where you're engaging with students from the moment that you're trying to convince them to come to your institution until they walk across the stage, that I am not your traditional CFO.
Right.
I mentor lots and lots of students students, right? And my
Right.
assistant, in fact, who's been on this campus for 20 years, says that in my first year, we had more student traffic in my first 6 months than she had seen in a decade, right?
Wow. That's
Um,
incredible.
and it's that I don't see myself as this person who sits in the tower and makes decisions.
Right.
I'm actually the person who's walking across campus. I can't walk into our student center and not have 3 or 4 hugs
Really.
or that kind of
Hmm.
interaction. I am truly your atypical CFO because I expect students to come in and engage with me.
Which is, I think, really special about you and this position.
Yeah,
And I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot in class is just the business management side of higher ed and how it conflicts, right? Like how it naturally conflicts with the enrollment management side sometimes.
right. But think
But
about
it
it.
really shouldn't.
Yeah, but think about it. It's incumbent upon me that other people understand how I make the decisions that I
Hmm.
make and that they not feel like something that came from on high, right?
Right.
Like, who makes those? You
Right.
know who makes the decisions. And Sarah, I guess I would just throw this piece in because I think it's hilarious. So we're about to repurpose a space on campus,
Hmm.
okay? It's not serving in the function intended, so we're turning it into something else. So I'm sending out, a couple weeks ago, I sent out an email to explain why it's changing and and what it's going to be and so on and so forth. So one of our new student senators said that he read the campus-wide email and he was completely prepared to be pissed off and to email the person who had made this decision.
Hmm.
And he got to the bottom and he saw Bronte Burleigh-Jones and he says, oh,
Oh,
I'll just let that go, right?
right.
He
Because you,
knows me well enough to know that everything that I said about what we've done to get to this decision was true,
right.
and there was a real basis for making the decision. Even if he didn't like it, he trusted the source. But that's because he knew the source.
Hmm. Well, because you've built those relationships with
Yeah.
students and been transparent and authentic throughout the process, is what it sounds like.
Imagine that.
Right. Um, and that, I think, is something I hear our students say is a problem with upper administration, and I think specifically business and finance, right? Because it's just
Yep.
not something that we always understand.
Right. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Um, can you talk about the differences in maybe being at Dickinson compared to some of your other institutions, and does that impact the work that you do or how you do your work?
Oh my God, yes. So I've been at 3 institutions. I was at Houston Tillotson, which is a historically Black college, church related. Um, I would say the vast majority of the students there, not all, but the vast majority are first gen.
Okay.
Okay. You compare that to St. John's College in Annapolis, which is a great books school, a very specialized curriculum. It's either for you or it's not,
It's not.
because it's an all required curriculum. Student population of less than 500, okay? But it's also because it's very specialized, very hands-on.
Right.
Dickinson, 2,300 students, highly selective National Liberal Arts institution.
Yes.
Okay, so the students at St. John's are more like the students at Dickinson, right?
Right.
But the students at Dickinson are kind of more representative of all kinds of students, where the
Sure.
folks at St. John's are, a Johnny is just a special kind of person, okay?
Is it in a good way?
And I mean, in its own way, it's not a good, it's not a bad, but
it's just
when I
different.
meet people who say that they're a St. John's alum,
Hmm.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
I got it. Yeah.
yep, you are.
Uh-huh.
So being at a church-related, historically Black campus was just, I have to tell you, that was the most meaningful experience that I've ever had, okay? I come from a college-educated family. I always knew that I was going to college. All my siblings are college. I mean, it's what we do. That's what it means to be a Jones, okay? But when you're working on a campus with a lot of first-generation students whose parents may, more often than not, had not planned or prepared them to go to college, students who were not on the college prep, AP, right, advanced kind of trajectory, it makes you appreciate, one, who you are and what you were exposed to, right? I just took for granted that everybody knew they were going to college and all of their parents were doing, nope, not at all.
Right. Some people just show up on the first day.
Right. And then on that campus, you know, I met students whose parents were incarcerated, kids who were raised by their grandparents and didn't know how they were going to make it from point A to point B, had no clue about the FAFSA or, you know, student debt or retention or GPAs. That was the most meaningful job I have ever had.
Wow.
Right? Because I know I was making a difference in the trajectory of families, right? Because once I educate this person, right, then it becomes possible for other people in that family, right? And that, oh my God, that was so meaningful. And then for it to be a church-related institution, when there was a problem, we went to the chapel, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the meetings took place. That's where the serious discussions took place. Thursday at 11 a.m., the campus almost shut down because people were going to chapel, and you expected to see people in chapel, right?
Yeah.
That is so special.
That it is.
That's just, and I've not had that at my other two institutions, and I miss that.
Right. Well, I'm thinking about meetings held in a chapel and how then.
It's powerful.
Absolutely. And yeah, like just walking in and then my defenses are down because
it
is a sacred place.
And there's a whole another way that you talk about things when you know that you are a church-related institution.
Exactly. Like there's a deeper purpose.
It's a deeper purpose. So just tremendously meaningful.
Right. Well, and it sounds like you got that from a few perspectives.
Yeah. My time at St. John's, that was an important transition for me. And I want to make sure I say this clearly. I needed to make the transition to a majority institution so that no one thought that I could only work in an environment with my people, right?
Yeah.
So that was important, right? No. I can do this and manage money anywhere.
Anywhere, right.
Right. So that was an important transition. And I remember there were people who asked the search firm, do you think she can make this?
They did.
I've been educated at majority institutions. What would make you think I can't do this, right?
Right.
And so that was I got to prove it, right? I could show you better than I can tell you.
Right.
Right.
And moving into another HBCU or minority serving institution as your next step would close out other options.
Right. No. That would have I would have capped off my career.
Exactly.
Because then people would have decided for me
just
that I could only. But that's the thing, and I do want to convey this in this interview. I am a woman of color. Okay. I'm clear about that, and I know everything that brings with it.
Right.
Okay. I am also a member of the LGBTQIA community, and so I also know what that means. So that means for me that I have to be very deliberate in the decisions I make about my career, right? Because I'm combating, right, all these other things around me that people think about me without ever having met me. Right? So that transition to St. John's was really important.
Absolutely.
Right? But that was a different environment. And so very insular. You're a Johnny, you're not a Johnny. And if you're not, it's kind of hard to fit into that environment. Very successful time there. I was there for 7 years. But being on a campus like Dickinson is more in keeping with what works for me. And it's interesting because I mentor a lot of students on campus. So I mentor lots of women. I mentor lots of students of color, members of the LGBTQ community. I'm a mentor to students, but there's so many buckets for me to pick from. And actually, I don't pick. They actually tell one another. Have you met Bronte? You need to go over to Old. Oh, that happened to you? You should go and see Bronte, right? And so there are people who just show up and it's like, hey, so-and-so told me that I.
Right. Well, I mean, that's basically what I heard too. Like, I need to speak to someone, and my friend, oh, you need to know her. Like, I don't even know. You
Yeah,
need
so
broadband. Okay,
that's powerful.
it is, right? Like, and part of the message was a Black queer woman
Yeah,
leading an academy, right? Like, in this, like, you
yeah,
got to know her.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I can see then being in a space where you are known,
yeah.
that how powerful that is as well.
And the
It's
thing
special.
that's also really important is that I don't fit into the boxes that people, right?
Right.
So I am a lesbian, but I'm also in a sorority,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm heavily into my sorority, and I was actually instrumental in bringing the chapter back to Dickinson, right?
Mm.
But wait a minute, what?
Right.
Right? So forget what you thought about all of these, right? That she's Black, that she's this, that she's that. No, I am living the life that I choose to
Mm-hmm.
live. Don't define it for me,
Exactly.
right? And so I think that also resonates with the students.
Sure. How'd you get to that point? Was it always easy to be you?
No, I would say it's not. It wasn't. Um, but you wake up one day and you recognize that there's only one you,
Yeah.
and you do bring something special to the table. So I
Absolutely.
own every part of my identity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I am a person of color. And so that means I hear and see issues in a different way. And I need you to pay attention to the fact that I'm hearing, no, let's go back. I'm a woman. I'm a member, right? And
Right.
so all of that shows up in my meetings, in the way that I manage situations, because it needs to, because I have to be I can't just be the physical thing in the room without being the voice in the room that's
Right.
representing all that I am.
Mm, right. So your identity is directly impacting your leadership
It
practices.
definitely.
Great. Everything that I've been reading about leadership is lending itself to that, right? This idea that we have to know who we are
Right,
to lead others.
right.
Can you talk a little bit more about your leadership style or administrative style?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about that when you asked me, when I got your questions. I would,
Yeah.
without a doubt, say that I come at everything that I do from a coaching perspective. So it's important to know that I played basketball.
Okay.
It's important to know that I was the point guard. And it's so funny because that shows up in how I work, right?
Really?
So I don't know how well you know basketball,
Yeah,
but
I
the
know
point
enough.
guard
Yeah, runs the game, right?
runs the game, right? That's the person who gets the ball, comes up the floor, and decide how they're going to make the thing happen, right? Who's open? Nope, we're not going to call that play. Oh, it's a half court press. That means we need to do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would say, and my staff would say this of me too, I never have meetings to take on an issue where I have one person in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have multiple people in the room because everybody can contribute to, and I don't just bring people to bring people, right?
Sure.
But if I'm talking about a construction project, I also need somebody from the finance team, because facilities are going to think about how the thing gets built. The financing people are going to help me think about the other aspects of the project, right? And I also look at a situation to understand, are all the players in the right position?
Oh, I
Right.
like that. Yeah.
So I will tell you that in all three of my vice presidencies, I've done some level of reorg, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because one, you have to know the job that you're being asked to do. And then when you're clear about that, you assess your players, right?
Right.
And I haven't gotten rid of anybody, but I will tell you that I have moved people around. So here at Dickinson, when I got here, the person who was the associate vice president of facilities, and he knows I would say this about him, he's not detail oriented,
Sure.
but he's visionary,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So he is now the associate vice president of sustainability and facilities planning, and not facilities, the day-to-day management of my buildings and grounds, because that means that I need somebody paying attention to the work orders. I need somebody making sure that we're in compliance with A, B, C, D, and E. Those aren't things that, that was never going to happen on his watch.
Right.
Okay. But when I want to talk about developing a LEED Platinum building and all of the LEED kind of characteristics, or we want to repurpose a space, right? He's got a vision unlike anybody else,
Wow.
but his
Yeah.
attention to detail, never happening, right? So
Yeah. Right.
let me get somebody else to handle the details and let you be the visionary. And as a visionary, oh my God, who's not responsible for details, he thrives.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then when I couple him with the detail person and bring in the finance person, oh my God, the stuff that we've been able to do for the college,
Wow. That's
right,
incredible.
was just moving players around, right? And
Mhm.
understanding what your strengths are and what they're not. We are not all good at everything.
Exactly. Right. And
Um,
I think sometimes there's a disconnect where we know a lot about ourselves and then we enter a space and we know a lot about the jobs, but we're not seeing where those things align.
yeah,
And having a good leader recognize that from the
yeah,
outside is
right. And the other thing I would say to you, and my students who I mentor and my staff would all say this, I'm fair.
hmm,
And you know where I'm coming from.
yeah.
So Ken knew it wasn't personal that I was changing his responsibilities, and he could trust me when I said, your skill set lends itself to a different set of responsibilities. This
Ex-
isn't a demotion. You still are you were still a starter. You're just starting in a different role.
right. The
Right?
great analogy. Right.
Um, so the other thing I would say, because I do think this is important for the class to understand, and this is where identity comes into play. As a woman of color, I know what it's like to be invisible to some people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no one on my staff who's invisible. And when I say that, I mean the grounds crew, the person who runs the mail, the line staff in the dining hall, the housekeepers. I have 250 people on my staff. I know them all by name or by descriptor, right?
Sure.
So Ronnie, the guy who drops off the mail, eats pizza because he eats pizza for
Yeah.
breakfast. But I know them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They know that I know them, right?
Exactly.
I've taken the time to get to know them. I spent a month in the facilities department when I first got here, went out on site with job site with all of my folks, did the same thing in dining. So I don't just see Sarah. It's like, Sarah, I remember that, so-and-so is going
Yeah.
back to school. Is she ready? Is she ready? That, oh my God, that matters so much to people. So I know that the MBAs and CPAs on my staff, but I also know the people who are picking up the trash in every building that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there is no one who's invisible on my staff. Everyone matters. And I would tell you that's a hallmark of my leadership style. And people know it.
Right. I love it. And I think that is so important and not something that we speak a lot about. And I don't know if I'd ever thought about it in terms of being invisible but it makes so much sense hearing you
But
say
it's
that and how that came through, of course, because we do not see some people.
no, we
Um,
don't. We don't see the person who empties the trash in the building until the trash doesn't get emptied.
right. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And there are so many of those people on our campuses.
And people, and I watch it. People will. I'm looking upside down. People walk by the person who's gardening, right,
Yes.
until there's trash in the bushes, and they want to know why somebody on the grounds team hasn't gotten it. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely. I
Without
do.
understanding that when I walk by and I speak to Helen every day, Helen's more apt to hear me when I say, Helen, yesterday there was a whole bunch of stuff over here, right?
Right.
She hears me with a different set of ears because I know who she is
Right.
and I've acknowledged her all along.
Exactly. You see her differently. So
I
she
see her.
hears you
Yeah, I
differently.
see her.
Like, yeah, right. Yes, you see her at all.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so what are your biggest conflicts in this position?
Um, so this is really funny, right? So this goes back to being a woman, right?
Yeah.
And it definitely goes back to being a person of color. My expertise gets questioned more often than not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how it plays out. So I'm the CFO, but there's a planning and budget committee on campus, okay? It's chaired by a faculty member, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's a new faculty member every year, and so it takes me most of the fall semester to get them up to speed to what they're doing, and then, right? But I could get up and make a presentation about an issue, and I'm gonna get 25 questions. I could put David or Ben up, who really are just even learning the lingo, and they get no questions.
Right. Their authority is not questioned.
And so it's curious how often I get questioned. And it's funny because the women in the faculty meeting, they say they love it when I get up because it's kind of like, here she goes. Okay, who's going for it first? And that I'm always so calm about answering the question because I know that I know what I know.
Yes.
Right? And it's primarily the men in the room who have to ask me 9 million questions. But I would say that's the biggest challenge I face. I have 2 associate VPs who are male in the business office. I can send them to deliver the same message and there will be fewer questions.
Fewer questions. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my expertise and authority, so it's that I'm tested more often than I think, than I know others are who know less than I know. So, and that's a very real part of being a woman and a person of color doing this work.
That's so everything I have read that sounds like the experience. Seems like a very real experience. Does it impact your mental health or feelings, or did it?
Because I know it now.
Okay.
Right.
Like, I know.
I mean, I know that it's going to happen. Right.
I see. You expect that behavior.
I expect it. And so for me, it's almost like bring it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And the running joke on my staff is, so I'm into eyeglasses. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, those are amazing.
But I have like 7 pair of eyeglasses, right? And one of them is a red pair, okay? If I wear my red pair, she's coming. She's ready for you.
Right.
I have a pair of red cowboy boots. I have on the boots and the glasses.
Watch out.
Like, they ain't ready.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like right? And so for me, I've turned it
showdown.
Almost a game.
Yeah, right.
Because I trust my expertise at what I do. And so if you want to banter with me, let's do it. Let's do it, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is, I'm now I've just finished my 5th year. I'm going into my 6th year. The questioning has gotten less and less over time. But I think there's some people who just can't help themselves because the messenger is not familiar. I mean, it's not the standard messenger, right? For this kind of material. So they can't help but rise to their feet, right?
Right.
Like, they can't help it. And so if you go into it believing that, right?
Yeah.
It just becomes part of your workday.
I like that. And that is, I think, makes a nice parallel to your sports analogy earlier. Like, you're ready to go no matter what. And have trained for those meetings, right? Like, in all the work that you've done, you have the answers.
And if I put on my red boots and put on my Jordans, and I'm ready. You know what I mean?
Right. I'm thinking about Tiger Woods on Sundays, right? You remember, like, he had that wasn't it a red shirt? Didn't he wear his red shirt and his black pants and that zone, right? Of, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm doing.
I know what I'm doing.
Right. And I'm sorry that we live in a place where you have to prove yourself more. Women and women of color, particularly, that seems to be.
But at the same time, it's powerful for our students. We just had recently change in student senate, and so the student senate president gets to come to the finance committee of the board. So this particular student, the new student senate president, is a rising senior. I've known Kevin since he came to campus. But I've known him casually around. So he came to his first board finance committee meeting in May. And afterwards he saw me and he said, I've always had the utmost respect for you, but the way you handled yourself in that meeting, as a woman of color in a room with primarily white older men, you didn't flinch. Every question that was directed to you, you had an answer.
Nice.
And he said, I thought to myself, that's one badass. That's just right.
Yeah.
And so, and he's a student of color, but it was good for him to see how to manage yourself in those situations, right?
Absolutely.
And so the things that I'm teaching the students by them just being in the room, whether it's at the faculty meeting or at the board meeting, right?
Right.
So it is what it is. I do get challenged,
Absolutely.
but it's in how I respond, right? So the preparedness and the, you know, I'm not going to get flustered.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that was a dumb question. Right, but right, and so that's part of the fun for people in faculty meeting. Like, did they really just ask for that, right? And like waiting to see me how I'm going to react, and I don't, right?
Yeah.
Sarah, well, as I just said, I'll go back a slide. Do you see dot dot dot, right? Like,
wow,
right?
Yeah.
You're the day that you make me react,
Yeah. That's
right?
But what a great skill and that you've learned and can incorporate, because that most people do react, I think, when approached.
Well, but that's what people want you to do.
That's
right?
the goal, right?
That is so totally the goal. And so I do think this is also an important point, especially for women of color who might be in your program.
Yeah, we have.
Being labeled the angry Black woman is the worst thing that could possibly happen to a person. And I know I can't lose my cool for that one reason, because the day that happens, my credibility goes out the window, right? So even when people get on my last nerve, and let me be clear, they do, right? You got to hold it inside, because you know what card they want to be able to play.
Exactly.
And you're not playing it on my watch, right?
Right.
Now, that does lead to extra pressure, because there are times that people really are trying to push your button, and you know that, right? And so that's when you, Sarah, right?
Absolutely. And that would be really difficult for me. And so I always have a lot of respect for people that do understand that and then can just move on very calmly. I think it's an incredible skill. Again, something that you probably had to learn for a reason.
Yeah, so these are all the things that you can't necessarily learn in a class.
Right. Yeah.
Life is going to teach you these things, but having been on the front lines, I'm telling you, it's very real.
Very real. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. And it sounds like what we've been talking about, but just the way your personal values, there seems to be really interconnected to your leadership.
Yeah.
So, and that there's not a disconnect.
No, I am my authentic self. I bring all of that into the decisions that I make, and I can stand by my decisions.
Yeah.
I don't carry forth an agenda that I don't believe in. I won't put my name on it.
Yes. Great. Wow. Thank you. What else would you like to share about leadership or your position or anything that?
I would say the thing that has worked for me is truly being my authentic self.
Yeah.
Right? Not trying to be anybody else but Bronte.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But giving all of me to whatever it is that I'm doing. So I don't do anything partially. I'm in. Like I'm an all-in kind of girl. Right?
Yes.
So if I'm working on something and I'm going to put my name, if I'm going to fix my name to it, you can trust that I have done my due diligence. I've done all of the background analysis. If I'm bringing it forward, I've done my homework. Yeah. Right? You don't have to look at it and say, well, is this a day that she didn't really feel like it? If my name is in it,
then it's
right.
There. Right.
So that's something that I would share. Always show up as your best self and only deliver your best product. If it's not ready, hold it until it's ready. Don't just because,
Yeah.
right? Nope. I'm going to need a little more time, because your reputation and your name are all you have.
Mm-hmm.
Don't compromise that, right?
Yeah.
So when you hear that I'm speaking somewhere, you can trust I've prepared. If I've written the report, you can trust what's in it, right?
Yes.
And that's something I have always held near and dear, that if my name's affixed to it, it's quality,
mm-hmm.
right? And so I would say that's, from a leadership standpoint, consistency.
Mm-hmm.
I was with someone just yesterday, and I asked her, she's new to the college and she doesn't report to me, but she is in a lot of meetings with me. And she's actually asked me to mentor her. And so I said to her, well, how do I present? How do I show up for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did we end up here, right?
Right.
And she laughed and she says, people ask me all the time, you're pretty close to Bronte, how'd that happen? And she's like, she's no nonsense. She has high expectations, but you know what she wants, because she's clear about her expectations.
Yeah.
And if you deliver, oh my God, she'll invite you into a world of opportunity that, you know, she'll call you and say, hey, you want to work on this? And then you get exposed to, but you got to come ready. Like,
Exactly.
don't show up not prepared, right?
Right.
And so it was good for me to hear her say, right, that there's clarity around expectation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I will develop you, but I have expectations about what that means,
With it,
right?
right.
Because you can think,
and you're part in that process, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Like,
You can think a certain level of things about yourself, but to hear how you show up and present to others,
yeah.
That felt good, because she's new to the campus, and she was like, no, that was immediately clear to me.
Wow.
Like, you
Yeah.
was ready. I needed to get to know you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording
Okay.
here.